Before we dive into this gripping sci-fi tale, take a second to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you love stories where humanity stands at the edge of intergalactic judgment. What would you do if the galaxy feared your best friend? Today's story is a powerful HFY journey filled with betrayal, loyalty, and a howl that shook the stars. Stick around till the end and trust me, it's one you won't forget. Now, let the story begin. The chamber reeked of sterilized air and silent fear. 12 species sat in the circle of judgment, each cloaked in authority, each flinching every time the word direwolf echoed across the tribunal floor. The air shimmered with the scent of ionized ozone and tension. Archon Vrel, a six-eyed crystalline being from the Trinari cluster, leaned forward, his voice buzzing like static across every translator in the chamber. Let it be recorded that the Terran bioengineered warbeast, designation direwolf, has been apprehended on Daros 3. It is scheduled for termination under Section 7 of the Galactic Xenobiological Warfare Treaty. Across the polished black table, a soft murmuring followed. A lizard-like diplomat from the Graal Confederacy raised a clawed hand. With all due respect, the creature has shown no aggression since its capture. Are we not violating the Accord of Sentient Rights by executing a being that currently poses no threat? A bulbous slug being from the Vith system hissed with disdain. You forget what it did during the siege of Malekar. That beast tore through an entire battalion. It was not bred for peace. It was engineered to kill. The room fell silent as a projection shimmered into view. A massive creature filled the screen, nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, a hulking frame of muscle beneath thick silvery fur. Its eyes, glowing faintly amber, seemed to bore through the recording device. Rows of obsidian fangs glistened as it turned to the camera, muzzle drenched in something that could only be blood. The image froze mid-snarl. Archon Vrel's voice was flat. This is not a companion animal. This is a relic of Terran warfare. A living weapon that slipped through disarmament. Its existence alone violates the fragile trust between Earth and the wider galaxy. But it didn't resist capture, murmured one of the younger delegates from the Thalen sector, tentacles nervously twining. It was quiet. No one had an answer for that. A hidden door hissed open, drawing eyes from the footage to the real thing. Encased in a magnetically sealed pod, the dire wolf was wheeled into the observation deck below the chamber. It lay perfectly still, limbs relaxed, its breathing slow and controlled. Even now, contained behind 4 layers of shielding, its presence caused a ripple of unease. The pod hummed softly as it maintained stasis, suppressing movement but not consciousness. And then, it opened its eyes. Several council members recoiled. The beast didn't move. It didn't snarl or snap or even blink. It simply watched. Archon Vrel's voice dropped in tone. This creature is called Ghost. It is the last remaining operative from the Terran Dire Wolf program, a violation of 10 interstellar conventions. The Terran government claims it was decommissioned and lost. Lost? Sneered a baritone voice from the Ithri collective. That thing went rogue. Slaughtered pirates, raided black market labs, and vanished into a jungle moon. No confirmed kills since the war ended, said the Thalen representative again, more firmly this time. Yet none have dared to approach it until now. Silence. Ghost let out a slow huffing breath inside its pod. Come. Like a creature not entirely unaware of the spectacle around it. Like something waiting. Vrel turned his gaze across the circle. This council exists to preserve peace. We vote not based on sympathy but survival. One by one they raised their limbs, paws, digits, and appendages. The sentence was passed. Execution was set for the following cycle. When the chamber cleared, a solitary being remained behind, hidden in the shadows of the upper gallery. He had watched it all in silence, arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes burning not with fear, but something else entirely. Ronan Vale hadn't worn his uniform in years. Not since Earth ordered him to give up the one creature in the universe he still called family. They said Ghost was too dangerous. Too unpredictable. Too emotional. That last one made Ronan laugh, but not because it was wrong. Because they were right. Ghost had always been emotional. Loyal to a fault. Ronan raised him from a pup, nurtured the creature when its own instincts screamed to lash out. He taught it language, not through words but through time. Through the unshakable bond only born in war zones and blood-soaked fields where survival depended not on weapons, but on trust. When the war ended, Earth ordered the warbeasts euthanized. Ronan went AWOL the night before the order came down. Ghost vanished not long after. Ronan spent 2 years combing backwater systems, tracing faint sensor anomalies and half-whispered rumors of something monstrous that didn't act like a monster, And now, Ghost was here. Caged like a biohazard. Labeled a relic. Set to die. Not if he had anything to say about it. At the docking ring, a minor comms officer blinked as Ronan shoved credentials into her hands. Credentials marked Terran Special Command, with overrides most ambassadors couldn't dream of accessing. The officer stammered. This is a closed tribunal, sir? I'm not here to watch, Ronan cut her off. I'm here to see my partner before you people murder him. The woman stared, torn between fear and protocol. In the end, she pressed the override key. Back inside the containment level, 2 guards flanked the pod where Ghost still lay. The room was lit only by soft blue stasis lights and the low hum of pressure seals. As Ronan entered, Ghost stirred. Slowly. Deliberately. And then, recognition. Ronan stepped forward, no armor, no weapons. Just a man facing a creature that could tear through reinforced durasteel. But Ghost didn't move. Not in aggression. He whimpered. It was a sound so alien to the officers monitoring the feed that one leaned toward the console. Did it just whine? Ronan crouched down, ignoring the cameras. Hey there, old boy. His voice cracked. Heard they found you. Ghost rose slowly, chains rattling softly against the magnetic anchors. Despite his size, his movements were graceful, controlled. The great beast nudged the inner wall of the pod, and Ronan pressed his palm flat against the translucent alloy. For a moment, 2 beings, 1 man, 1 monster, stood perfectly still, connected through silent understanding. You stayed away, Ronan whispered. I told you not to trust them. A low growl rumbled from Ghost's chest, not in anger but a frustrated, mournful sound. They're going to kill you, Ronan said flatly. Tomorrow. I tried to get an audience. They don't care. They're afraid. You scared them without lifting a paw. Ghost stared into him, and for just a moment, something shimmered behind those golden eyes. Something more than instinct. Something human. The door hissed open behind them. 2 guards entered, weapons drawn. Captain Vale, your time is up. Return to the shuttle. He stood slowly, not turning to face them. If you do this, he said, voice low, if you kill him, the galaxy will remember it wasn't because he was dangerous, but because you were. Ghost growled, this time louder. The guards flinched. Ronan reached into his pocket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out something small. A torn piece of fabric. Dirty. It looked like a strip from a Terran military uniform, the kind worn during the first drops on Malekar. Ghost's eyes locked onto it. Ronan folded it gently and placed it against the pod wall. For you, he whispered. In case I can't stop them. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep inside the creature, something stirred. Ghost didn't snarl. He howled. It wasn't loud. Not at first. But the sound built, low and ancient, rumbling through the containment field until the alloy itself seemed to vibrate. The guard stepped back, alarmed. One reached for a comm. But it was too late. All across Citadel Station, sensors flared. Telepaths screamed. Entire wings of sensitive equipment shorted out. The howl wasn't just sound, it carried meaning. Not words. Not language. Emotion. Loss. Grief. Loyalty. Love. It pulsed through walls, across species, into every being who had ever known the cost of war. Into every soul who had ever lost someone they could never forget. In the control room above, Archon Vrel stood frozen, staring down at the beast below. The monster was not attacking. It was mourning. And somewhere, beneath the chaos of alarm klaxons and security responses, a single thought struck him harder than any weapon could have. What kind of creature howls for its executioner? The chamber went silent. Ghost lowered his head. And waited. ChatGPT said. Ronan Vale stood before the observation window as if staring into a grave he couldn't climb into. Beyond the reinforced glass, Ghost lay curled in his pod, unmoving since the howl. A dozen medtechs and xenopsychologists flooded the chamber in its aftermath, attempting to analyze the psychic shockwave that had radiated through the station. None of them dared step closer than 20 feet. But Ronan didn't flinch. His face, worn and grim, bore the stoic resolve of someone who had walked too many battlefields and buried too many comrades. He hadn't come to grieve, not yet. He had come to fight, not with guns or rank but with the truth only he could speak. The council refused to see him again. They claimed the vote was final. No appeal. No discussion. The direwolf would be terminated before the next galactic cycle. So Ronan found another way. He walked the dim corridors of Citadel Station with a purpose. Beneath the polished metal floors and gleaming lights, he remembered the blood-soaked ground of Malekar, the screams of dying men, and the low, feral growl that always preceded salvation. He remembered a younger version of himself, broken and bleeding, watching a silver-furred beast rip through enemy lines, not out of programming but rage. Protective, primal rage. For him. The door to the restricted archives opened with a groan as Ronan slid a chip into the interface panel. Old access codes still worked, favors called in, debts collected, memories few dared revisit. Inside, a low glow illuminated shelves of encrypted data cores. He found what he needed on the fifth rack, Project Echo 13, codename, Direwolf Initiative. The data unlocked slowly. Audio logs. Genetic maps. Behavioral analysis. Field reports stamped with redacted names and sealed orders. His own voice echoed from an old debriefing file. Ghost isn't a weapon. He's a mirror. We made him, trained him, taught him what to protect. He doesn't kill because we tell him to. He kills to keep me alive. There's a difference. Ronan leaned against the console, jaw tight. They had never understood. Not the scientists. Not the generals. Certainly not the council. They saw power and assumed it meant control. But Ghost had never been controlled. He had chosen Ronan. Chosen to follow, to protect, to obey. That wasn't programming. That was something deeper, something no treaty could explain. He downloaded the files onto a secure node and shut the system down. It wouldn't be enough, not for the council, but it might reach someone. He just needed an opening. The next came sooner than expected. Dr. Arian Salas, a xenoneural specialist from the Ilaria Accord, requested an interview. She was one of the few scientists permitted access to the chamber after the howl. Her request was short, formal, and tinged with curiosity. When she met Ronan in the administrative wing, she was already reviewing telemetry on a translucent datapad. Her skin shimmered with the pale blue hue common to her people, and her large black eyes gave no hint of her thoughts. Captain Vale, she began, voice precise. The creature's psychic emission has caused waves throughout the telepathic registry. Empathic species are still recovering. Even non-sensitive beings report residual emotional feedback. It wasn't random, Ronan replied. She nodded, eyes never leaving her data. Agreed. That's why I'm speaking with you. He studied her face for a moment, measuring. He howled for me, he said finally. Not for escape. Not for mercy. For me. And why would he do that? Because I'm his pack. Her gaze lifted. You mean that metaphorically? No, he said. I mean it exactly. Salas paused, then gestured toward a private room. Once inside, she activated a white noise dampener and deactivated the recording node. I don't believe the council fully grasps what they're dealing with, she said. Nor do I believe it's truly a beast. Its neural architecture shows signs of adaptive emotional learning, complex bonding traits, mirror neurons that respond to visual and auditory stimuli with unusually high coherence. Frankly, it's frighteningly similar to the neural pattern of a loyal canine, or a child raised in isolation. Ronan sat down, brow furrowed. He's not a child. He's something we made to survive. We bred wolves and panther beasts from Orion 9, spliced Terran resilience into alien aggression, but it wasn't until we raised them that we saw the results. Ghost wasn't just trained. He was taught. Language, loyalty, strategy. Salas folded her arms. And after the war? They told me to turn him over for decommissioning. The rest were already gone. Ghost sensed something. Maybe from me. Maybe just instinct. He fled. And you? I didn't chase him. I knew he wouldn't hurt anyone unless they came after him first. Salas walked to the room's console and displayed an image of Ghost in his containment field. Every guard in that room reports the same thing. He watches. He tracks movement. But he doesn't show aggression. That's because he's waiting for orders. She turned slowly. From you? Ronan nodded. Silence stretched between them until Salas spoke again. I can try to argue for a psychometric evaluation delay. Maybe push for a reclassification of cognitive level. But it won't by more than a few hours. Then give me access to him, Ronan said. Not through glass. Let me speak to him. Let me show them he's more than what they fear. You're asking me to risk my credentials for a banned military construct. I'm asking you to let me save my friend. She hesitated, then tapped a code into her pad. 5 minutes. No recordings. No monitoring. And if he makes a single aggressive move, you won't get a second chance. Ronan didn't thank her. He only nodded. The chamber lights dimmed as he entered the containment vault. Ghost was already alert, muscles tense beneath his fur. He didn't growl, didn't move, just stared as Ronan crossed the floor. The guards outside shut the bulkhead. Ronan approached slowly. "It's okay, boy," he said softly. Ghost's ears twitched. A low rumble built in his chest, not hostile, not quite welcoming. Like a question. "I'm here," Ronan continued. "They think you're dangerous. They think you're a monster." Ghost lowered his head. "But I know the truth," Ronan said. "You're the last thing standing between them and what they fear most. Not you, but what you represent. Our bond. Our ability to create something so strong, it chooses love over blood." The beast let out a deep breath. Slowly he stepped forward, one paw at a time, until his massive head hovered just inches from Ronan's chest. The man didn't flinch. He reached up and placed his hand gently on the thick fur above Ghost's brow. "They won't listen to me," he whispered. "But they'll feel you. Just like they did with the howl. You have to show them." Ghost leaned into the touch, eyes half closed. The door hissed open again, too soon. Salas stepped in, eyes wide. "We have a problem. The council's accelerating the timeline. The execution's been moved to tonight." Ronan turned sharply. "What? Why?" "Because the howl spooked them. They think you triggered it. They're afraid you're regaining control." "I never lost control," Ronan growled. Salas's voice was tight. "They won't care. You have hours, maybe less. If you have any way of proving Ghost is more than an apex weapon, you need to do it now." She left the room and the door sealed behind her. Ronan dropped to one knee in front of Ghost. "They're scared. And fear makes them cruel. But I swear to you, I won't let them take you. One way or another, we're going to make them see." Ghost tilted his massive head, then released a low, deliberate sound, not a growl, not a howl. A wordless, humming affirmation. Ronan smiled just a little. He stood, resting one hand on the creature's flank. "They called you a weapon," he said. "But tomorrow they'll remember you for what you really are." The lights dimmed as the containment chamber powered down for shift transition. Outside, the council was preparing for a broadcasted execution. Inside, Ghost waited. And so did Ronan, not for mercy, but for his chance to make the galaxy listen. The execution chamber thrummed with energy, a low, pulsing hum that vibrated through the bones of everyone inside. It was a sound designed to remind observers that this was not a ceremony, not a moral debate. It was procedure. Clinical. Precise. Final. Ghost stood inside the central platform, unshackled but contained within an electromagnetic field calibrated specifically for his physiology. Around him, a circular array of pulsed ion emitters faced inward, powered and ready to fire at the push of a single command. On the surrounding catwalks, armed security in reinforced exosuits watched with tense fingers hovering over failsafes. Above them all, behind armored glass, the Galactic Council sat once more, their expressions a mixture of resolve and unease. The events of the previous day had not been forgotten, especially not the howl, but fear had a way of choking reason. They had accelerated the schedule, hoping to eliminate the problem before questions grew teeth. Ronan stood alone in the observer's wing, fists clenched behind his back. He'd fought to be here, invoking outdated clauses in Terran diplomatic treaties, threatening exposure of classified files. It had bought him one last chance to witness what they all believed would be the end. Ghost had not moved. Since being led into the chamber, the beast had remained still, head lowered slightly, body relaxed. To the untrained eye, it might appear subdued, resigned even. But Ronan knew better. That posture wasn't defeat. Was control. Ghost was waiting. The council's lead voice, Archon Vrel, activated the intercom. His crystalline face was unreadable as always, but his tone was sharp. "Let the record show that final protocol has been initiated. Subject is aware. No sedatives have been applied. All procedures are within treaty enforcement standards." Ronan stepped forward, palms against the glass. "He's not sedated because you know what that would do," he said, voice low. "You want him aware. You want him to feel it." Vrel didn't respond. The ion emitters began to glow. Ghost raised his head. For the first time since entering the chamber, his eyes swept the arena, not in panic, not in challenge, but with the slow, deliberate awareness of something that knew it was being watched. Evaluated. Judged. And then his gaze found Ronan through the glass. It locked there. A moment passed. Then another. Then Ghost howled. The sound didn't emerge all at once. It started in his chest, low and resonant, vibrating through the energy field like ripples across still water. The chamber's hum faltered. The lights flickered. Technicians scrambled at their stations as readings spiked beyond calibrated thresholds. On the council floor, two delegates winced, clutching at their temples. One collapsed, sobbing wordlessly. A Thalen representative fell to his knees, eyes wide with distant memories that weren't his. Ghost's howl tore through technology, bypassed synthetics, cut directly into the minds of every organic creature present. It wasn't just noise. It was a signal, pure emotional projection. Loss, grief, devotion, love. Images accompanied the sound, raw and unfiltered. Not visuals in the traditional sense but impressions. Sensory echoes. The feel of Ronan's hand stroking blood-matted fur. The smell of ozone on a battlefield. The quiet hum of a small, makeshift cabin where soldier and beast slept side by side. A whimper in the dark. A command whispered before the first charge. A bond. Security officers staggered. One dropped his rifle. Another fell back against the wall, gasping as tears ran freely down his cheeks. Even the hardened Ithari commander muttered a prayer to no one in particular. The emitters lost sync. The energy field destabilized. Still, Ghost didn't move from his place. He simply sang. And everyone heard it. Inside the council chamber, Archon Vrel stood frozen. His kind did not feel emotion the way mammals did. They didn't mourn. They didn't bond. But even he could not deny the effect. He watched as his fellow counselors succumbed one by one to the sound, some breaking down, others simply stunned into silence. Then the intercom clicked again. But this time it wasn't Vrel who spoke. It was Dr. Arian Salas. This is a formal intervention under Clause 78 of the Sentient Protection Compact. The subject has demonstrated telepathic communication, species-wide cognitive awareness, and emotional projection. By galactic law, execution must be suspended for evaluation. No such clause applies to war constructs, Vrel snapped. It does when that construct demonstrates volitional restraint, Salas countered, voice cold. He could have broken that field. We all know it. And yet here he is. Standing. Choosing not to harm anyone. Choosing to speak. Vrel hesitated. The room was already fracturing around him. I move for suspension of termination protocol, Salas continued. Effective immediately. I request a reclassification hearing. Another counselor, this one a matronly figure from the Intari quadrant, stood as well. Seconded. Thirded, came a trembling voice from the Thalen delegate, still pale. Vrel turned slowly, realizing the tide had shifted. We cannot be ruled by sympathy. We are not, Salas said. We are being ruled by evidence. If that howl had been hostile, none of us would be standing. It wasn't rage. It was grief. Vrel tried to protest further, but a hand touched his shoulder. The Intari leaned close and whispered something that made his eyes narrow. Then at last he pressed the override. In the chamber the lights dimmed and the emitters powered down. The field dropped. Ghost blinked once. Then he looked toward Ronan again. The glass parted. A door opened between them. Ronan didn't hesitate. He stepped into the chamber, boots echoing on the polished floor, pulse hammering in his ears. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Ghost took one step forward. Another. Then he lowered his head and pressed it gently into Ronan's chest. The man wrapped his arms around that massive, scarred neck, burying his face in the fur. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The sound was enough. Above them, silence reigned. Salas turned to the others. Tell me, she said softly, what kind of weapon mourns its own death? No one answered. Later, the council would convene in private. Debates would rage. Vrel would file formal objections, demanding a full inquiry into emotional manipulation. But the motion would carry. The execution would be nullified. Ghost would be declared a being of unique sentient status. Under watchful probation, yes, but alive. Protected. Ronan and Ghost would be escorted to a Terran diplomatic vessel under guard. But for now in that chamber they simply stood. Together. The galaxy had come to see a monster. But what they found instead was something far more dangerous to their way of thinking. Proof that even the most fearsome creatures, when raised with love, could learn to protect not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. And choice, they all knew, was the beginning of something impossible to control. The air aboard the Terran diplomatic cruiser was quiet, almost reverent. For once, the tension wasn't born of battle or politics. It came from the fragile, uncertain calm that follows the detonation of long-held beliefs. Ronan stood at the edge of the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. Ghost sat beside him, shoulders rising and falling in a steady rhythm, his massive frame still scarred, still imposing, but no longer seen as a symbol of terror. Now he was something else entirely. Something that neither the Council nor Earth had a name for. Behind them, the chamber doors slid open and footsteps approached, measured, confident, unmistakably diplomatic. Ambassador Tessa Corrin, Earth's chief envoy to the Galactic Council, joined them. Her formal suit was immaculate as always, but there was a trace of unease in her eyes that no grooming could hide. They voted, she said. Ronan didn't turn. And? Sentient status was granted. Limited. Monitored. But it's done. He can't be executed. He has rights. He let out a slow breath, one that seemed to bleed months of tension from his chest. That's not a victory, he said. That's them hedging their fear. It's the best you were going to get, Ronan? You know that. He nodded once, jaw tight. They're afraid of what he represents. And they should be, she said, surprisingly candid. You bonded with a bioweapon. You raised something designed to destroy and somehow you made it love. That terrifies them more than any arsenal Earth ever built. Ghost stirred at that, turning his head slightly to eye the ambassador. She didn't flinch. That alone earned her Ronan's attention. They'll keep watching him, she added, looking for a reason to revoke what they just gave. He's used to being watched, Ronan said. So am I. She paused before speaking again, choosing her words like someone handling a live explosive. There are whispers. Not from the council, not officially. But others, factions, species who feel the decision was too soft. That a precedent like this invites danger. There are those who think if the council won't act, someone else should. He turned to face her, eyes hard. Are you telling me there's a hit on Ghost? I'm telling you there might be, she said. And you'd be wise not to take this victory as the end of the fight. He glanced down at Ghost, whose ears had gone still, alert. The beast's instincts were sharper than any weapon's edge. Let them come, Ronan said. We're not hiding. No, she agreed. But you might want to be smart about where you go next. The galaxy's changed. And so have you. She left with no further explanation, her message delivered. Ronan stared out at the stars again, the void between systems suddenly feeling more claustrophobic than it had hours ago. He had expected resistance. He hadn't expected a war. But maybe that was inevitable. Maybe this was what always followed the discovery of something no one could explain. Ghost shifted beside him, brushing against his side with the ease of an old companion. Ronan placed a hand on the thick fur behind the creature's ears, grounding himself in that familiar presence. Then he turned and walked toward the navigation console. We're not heading back to Earth, he said. They'd just cage us there in a different way. Ghost followed without a sound. Ronan input a course manually, one not logged in official records. A remote outpost near the Sarin Expanse. Uninhabited. Unmonitored. It had once been a Terran supply base during the war, now long abandoned. There, he could regroup, train and think. Not hide. Plan. The ship jumped into FTL smoothly. For the first time in days, Ronan slept. It didn't last. They came just outside the Sarin system. The attack wasn't official. There were no council markings, no battle flags. Just a fleet of modified privateers outfitted with illegal stealth drives and high-yield plasma lances. Mercenaries. Professionals. Their signature didn't match any known government, which meant the threat wasn't political. It was personal. Ronan awoke to klaxons screaming through the cruiser. 3 ships. Smaller, faster. Meant to disable, not destroy. A boarding operation. By the time he reached the bridge, they had already cut through shielding protocols and initiated docking procedures. He didn't waste time with the automated defenses, they wouldn't last. He turned to Ghost. You know what to do. Ghost's eyes lit with the clarity of purpose he hadn't seen since the war. The creature moved with terrifying grace, vanishing into the shadows of the access corridors as Ronan armed himself. The first boarding party came in fast, clad in composite armor, pulse rifles at the ready. Ronan met them in the main corridor. He didn't try diplomacy. He shot the lead attacker in the throat before the man could speak. The others opened fire. The hallway lit with strobing flashes of gunfire and smoke. Ronan moved like a man possessed. Each round was deliberate, every movement calculated. Years of muscle memory returned in full force. But it wasn't enough. More came. Too many. Then came the scream. Not Ronan's. Theirs. One by one, their cries echoed through the ship, growing more animalistic by the second. Ronan ducked into a side alcove, letting the sounds guide him. When he rounded the corner, Ghost stood in the middle of 6 bodies, bloodied, not torn. Controlled strikes. Deliberate. Only one was still breathing, pinned beneath a massive paw. Ronan crouched. Who sent you? The man spat blood. You think, you won? That trial meant nothing. There are others. You're not special. No, Ronan said. But he is. Ghost applied more pressure. The man passed out. They left him there. The remaining invaders tried to retreat. Only one ship made it. Ronan didn't bother chasing them. He had what he needed. Proof. He accessed the mercenary ship logs, decrypted the orders. Anonymous accounts. Third-party proxies. But the directive was clear. Eliminate the direwolf. The man is expendable. This wasn't a mistake. This was the start of something larger. Back on the bridge, Ronan ran a diagnostic. Systems were damaged, but the jump drive still functioned. They needed to disappear. Not forever, he said to Ghost. Just long enough to figure out who's behind this. Ghost pressed his head against Ronan's chest again, a gesture both familiar and painful. I won't let them take you, Ronan whispered. They jumped. Hours later, a transmission reached the council. It came not from Ronan, but from the rogue mercenary ship that had fled the failed boarding. Encrypted. Fragmented. But the message got through. The beast had survived. The human had fought. And worse, someone had tried to silence them both, even after the council's ruling. That changed everything. In a special emergency session, the council met again. Accusations flew. Some demanded an investigation. Others demanded silence. Vrel, still bitter from his failed vote, said nothing. But Salas did. She stood in the center of the chamber and placed a recording on the holodeck. It was short. Just a clip. The howl. Not the original, but the one Ghost had released during the battle when he defended the ship. Even through recording, it was undeniable. He hadn't killed out of fury. He'd killed to protect. To protect Ronan. When it ended, Salas said only one thing. He is no longer a weapon. He is proof. Proof of what we made, what we tried to destroy, and what we must now protect. The council did not reach a consensus that night. But across the stars, whispers began. Not of war beasts or weapons. But of the dire wolf that had chosen not to be a monster. Of the human who had loved him enough to teach him how. And of the howl that once again echoed into the void, not as a cry of vengeance, but as a warning. They were still out there. Still standing. Still together. And this time the galaxy would have to learn a new rule. You do not corner the last wolf unless you are prepared to see what it guards.